As a practicing Christian, it doesn't mean that I only practice my religion when I'm at home by myself. It means when I step outside my door, I take Jesus with me wherever I go, right? Well, that's the ideal. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but the ideal is to actually make Jesus' teachings a part of my life. When I'm at work, God still wants me to represent him on my job. Recently at my job, we just had a gender discrimination training. And in this training, they were talking about how when we have a student that comes into our classroom, and let's say the student is a girl that identifies as a boy, when we talk to that student or we address that student, we have to always use the pronoun that that student wants us to use. Exodus chapter 22, verse 21 says, "Thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt." The Bible tells me that when it comes to dealing with other people, we should never discriminate, treat a person bad, or treat a person differently because of what they claim, where they stand. Whatever it is, I'm supposed to treat every single individual with respect, because that's what Jesus did. Jesus treated everybody with respect. The thing that I don't understand when it comes to gender discrimination on the job is they talk about protecting the rights of the individual person who wants me to use proper pronouns. So the job legally is supposed to be looking out for that individual. What about for me, right? As a practicing Christian on the job, what happens to my rights? Does my right get trumped because of what they want? Why isn't it both of us are respected in the workforce? Because the problem is, as a Christian, like was stated earlier, a boy is a boy, a girl is a girl. I've had students before in my classroom who claim to be another gender outside of what they actually are. The problem is the way I dealt with the whole situation. When a student comes into my classroom and that particular student claims a different gender, I always stuck with the last name. So what I did was I stayed neutral. I always showed the student respect. I always showed the student, I treated the student just like I treated every other student. Now, the thing I think sometimes that people don't really get when it comes to this whole gender issue is that it can really cause some confusion. So let me give you an example. So I only have one female in my class at this time. And the girl that I had who was claiming to be a boy, gender-wise, let's say she was the only one outside of my classroom and she was doing something. If I'm taking roll or I'm doing something, I'll say, "Hey, I'm missing a student. Can y'all see if I have anybody outside?" So my boys would come in and say, "Yeah, he's outside." He? Who's he? I'm not showing a he on my attendance. The thing was, they were addressing her as if she was a boy. And sometimes I was like, wait a minute, how am I supposed to know that y'all are actually talking about that student? Because they even referred to the student in the gender that she desired to be called. So sometimes that was a little weird at times too. Sometimes if there was an incident and something happened, they would come in and say, he got in an argument with Marcus over there. What? Who is the he? But then they were actually talking about my female student. And like you said, you can say it's not an issue, but that really messes with you, especially when you are trying to document things and you're supposed to keep up with a lot of stuff on your job. I spoke to HR as well, and I asked them, because the thing that comes up is, how am I as a Christian supposed to be protected on the job when it comes to dealing with these particular issues? Matthew chapter 7 verse 12, "Therefore all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets." So one time I wanted to address my student on this, and I said, "Hey, can I talk with you about something?" And the student said, "Yeah, let's talk, Mr. Perry." And I said, "Well, I want to talk to you about something personal. Is it okay?" I said, "I want to ask you about, your particular beliefs and stance on, gender and things of that nature." And she was like, "Oh yeah, definitely. And I said, "Okay." I said, so I want to ask you a question first. I want to get your answer to this. I said, I don't eat pork. So my kids know I'm a vegetarian. They pick at me all the time. She said, "Yeah, Mr. Perry, I know that." So I said, let's say I go to somebody's house and that person puts before me a plate of pork chops. I said, should I eat the pork chops so that I don't offend the person who gave it to me? And she said, no, Mr. Perry. She said, you have to stand on what you believe. If you believe that it is wrong to eat pork chops, you should not be forced to do it. I said, okay, cool. I said, so that's your stance on that? She said, yes, that's my stance. So I said, you believe that a person shouldn't be forced to do something that they don't believe? She says, that is correct. I said, okay. I said, well, on the job, should I be forced to call somebody the gender that they want to be called when they're not that gender? And she looked up into the sky and she said, Mr. Perry, that is a really good question. Yeah, it is a really good question, because you have to be consistent across the table. Galatians chapter 5 verses 14 says, for all the law is fulfilled in one word, even this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. The Bible teaches that I should treat others how I want to treat myself. So if I don't want somebody forcing me to believe or do something that I stand against, I mean, why should I want to do the same thing to them? I mean, that's pretty much being a hypocrite. We are always to represent Christ. Regardless of whether you disagree with a person's lifestyle, you or me are not free from our obligation to treat that person just like Christ treated everybody else. Sometimes I think that we forget that Jesus was perfect and he lived amongst people every day that had problems and issues. The Gospels could have went this way. Why won't you get your act together? You aggravating me today with the way that you are. How many times I got to tell you, see, but you don't find Jesus doing that. I mean, you and me do that with people we get annoyed with, but Jesus didn't act like that towards others. So that's something that we have to constantly be aware of, living in today's society and this world. I hope you liked this video, and please share with me in the comment section. What is your beliefs? What is your stance on this? How do you handle this particular situation in the workplace? If you have, what are some situations you've come across and how did you handle them?